Um,
Alrighty, I am here with Chase. It is a beautiful Monday morning. We are experiencing and feeling the effects of Donald Trump's tariffs that he placed last week. I think last week we were discussing potentially talking about the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, and we definitely want to get to that at some point, whether it's in this video or another. But there seems to be a little bit more of a pressing situation, which is Donald Trump has announced tariffs as of last Wednesday, or reciprocal tariffs, if you can really call them that. Um, we're going through unprecedented times, and I am fearful that Donald Trump is going to sometime next year or the year after that going to try to take this as a win because I think the reality is stocks eventually always come back up, right? So if we lose 50%, like we have been so far, and by next year we gain 60%, don't let MAGA take that as a win. It is very frustrating and infuriating because we still would have lost money if we grow by 60% after losing 50. Because look at $100, right? You lose 50% of $100, you have $50. You grow that by 70%, or by the 60%, like I said, you're only having getting $75 back. So the reality is this Trump tariff is not good for the economy and is completely sinking us right now. And it's very frustrating to watch because I know that Trump is going to try to take this as a win next year when you see the economy go up by like 60% and um and him make this claim like, oh, now the economy is going back up even though we're already at a loss. So wanted to, hear what your thoughts were, Chase, on where we are, and what you think the next steps for Donald Trump are, and if you think that there's going to be a commitment to the tariffs for long term.
I think it depends on what he can get for it. They're only willing to tank the market because they think they're going to be able to use tax cuts and then they can also cut interest rates, which seems to be basically the opposite of what the Fed was saying that they were going to do, because this is just going to increase inflation. Um, and the Fed responds to the actual economic conditions, not the complaints and the wants of a crazy man, which, at this point, you were saying kind of he would play it off as a win. I think he should like let him play it off as a win because everybody in their right mind is going to know that that's not a win because I'm not quite sure that it's going to end as rosy as people think.
Yeah.
I think we haven't even seen the tariffs actually take effect. They're not even taking effect till the 9th. And already the markets are responding like this. And then we're always also talking about possibly adding on more tariffs. And then, some countries will not respond. They don't have the capacity economically, they don't have the will to do that. And quite frankly, I don't think it's a bad thing to have a 0% tariff or 0% tariff rate between countries. I think free trade is a good goal and we should have that. But you know, there's very little to indicate that there's any willingness to compromise or to, pull them back or restart them. And we literally saw with the tweet that, oh, I might suspend it for 90 days. The market goes up in response to that. Like it actually almost trended positive at that point, which is crazy. And then the White House is like, yeah, no, that's not it. These are coming in place. And, you know, he keeps promising it and people don't believe him. And I don't know why. Like, of course he's going to keep these in here. Now, it's a question of whether I think Congress takes it back. I think there's only so much economic damage. I mean, if that bill gets passed, but there's only so much panic and economic uncertainty that people are going to be willing to take. Like, You think people were worried about prices under Joe Biden's economy? They're going to be worried about prices under Donald Trump's economy. It doesn't change. And I think the assumption that most Americans are just pure MAGA and are going to accept any, any medicine, as he was saying it like this, you know, is just fooling yourself. People are going to start seeing jobs cuts. They're going to see a cutback on spending. I mean, we're seeing a shrinking GDP.
Yeah.
Those all are going to affect people negatively. And they're not going to sit there and believe you just got to trust Donald Trump because at a certain point it's going to say, we don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem like he's willing to do anything to actually alleviate the pain. Um, it's beautiful to him, is what he's saying.
It's wild to me, and I actually do want to correct myself. I just realized that I did the math wrong in my upcoming or like my introduction. I said, oh, if you invest $100, you lose $50, or you lose 50%, which is 50, you get $50. If it grows by another 50% from that $50, that's only $75. So I think that he's going to try to take that as a win, as like saying like, hey, this has grown 50%, when in reality it's only $75 when you originally started off with 100. So I wanted to correct that. I was thinking about that when you were talking. I was like, wait a second. I was like, did I say 60%? I did the whole math wrong. So I apologize on that. But I think you're right. I think that what's wild to me is that he's putting tariffs on countries that we also have surpluses with, or that don't have tariffs on us in the first place, right? So like I look at like a country like an Ethiopia, right? Their GDP is like $95. Unless they are obviously going to have a surplus because they have a significantly smaller GDP than us. So unless you're going to suddenly get Ethiopia to buy millions and millions of dollars worth of goods from the United States, there's always going to be a surplus. And that's not a bad thing. That's what's wild to me is like, they're trying to paint that as like these deficits are bad things. And you're just like Ethiopia does not have the purchasing power of the United States. How are they going to go from a deficit to or how are they going to go to a surplus right now with us to a deficit? It makes literally no sense whatsoever. I saw you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Um, I mean, I do think there is some reality that yes, there is an issue with the trade dynamics that we have with certain countries.
With
I think
certain countries, but this
no,
is
I think even
widespread.
not necessarily to say that Ethiopia is a problem or any specific country that doesn't necessarily have the same, economic power as America or anything like that. But I do think that, when you see a shift towards China being the dominant partner of a lot of countries and shifting those, I mean, there's an oversupply of a lot of things in China and manufacturing and things like that. So they're having to find other markets for it.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they go to those other markets? And the thing is at a certain point, you're going to not be able to compete. There is truth that there's not as many American car companies in Europe that perform well or are constantly on the street. But it's not the Europeans' fault that American companies can't compete there. They don't compete in a way that actually would allow them to have a sustainable market. I mean, uh, a Cybertruck is not going to be able to drive in a lot of streets in Europe. You know what I'm saying? You can't have things like that size wise, and it just doesn't make sense. So you have to compete in a more aggressive manner. And the issue is, I don't think a lot of American companies have really competed for a while. They've kind of sat back and lived in their, glory of the money that they've made and like, entering China and different things of like the early 2000s and things like that, where it was kind of good. Um, just kind of boosting that economy and things like that. Um, so I think there is a reason for negotiating better deals and things like that. But what is the McDonald's Islands? What are we doing? Penguins are just
Exactly.
that's
There's
the point.
literally no
There's no actual. This isn't. There is no actual policy here. The number that they created for the tariffs is arbitrary. It's not the actual tariff rate that they have. And
Exactly.
beyond that, you have over 50, like 50 countries have supposedly come and, asked for a deal. I bet you, some of them I was seeing it was, Vietnam saying we're gonna do $0 on tariffs for European goods. We're gonna do zero, or excuse me, American. Continually like offering these things. The thing is, it's there's no offer for negotiation.
Yeah.
He's obsessed with tariffs and he's going to keep it there because he thinks that's the only way that you're actually going to be able to manage the budget that he's creating. I mean, or attempted to create. There's no real logic to anything that he's doing. It's the whims of one man. Because I'm telling you, there's
Which is
no
terrifying.
no real intelligence here. Like you see all the cabinet heads making completely different arguments for what they're doing, and it's all, around the same thing. But I was seeing Lutnick talking the other day about, oh, all these jobs are going to be brought here, and we're going to have automation. So the robots are gonna have the jobs here. And it's like American robots versus Chinese robots, which like, yes, automation is an advancement that will make much more sense. Just in some of the factory jobs and things like that we have, it makes sense to do those things. And in order to compete efficiently, you're gonna have to do those things. Um, but the argument that it's going to support American jobs is just not true. You're literally seeing people get fired and things like that. So I don't think there's any goal that they have supposedly is not going to be met by this, and it's just going to put us in a worse position. And you know, I don't think it's going to be stable. I think it's going to be ensue a real trade war. There will be some countries who just sit out. China's not going to take this. The EU's not going to take this.
Mhm.
Most of our allies, frankly, previously, they have the economic power to actually sit there and push back against us.
Yeah.
We might think that we're so strong and things like that, but we're only strong because of those alliances. And when you start messing with people's economies, I mean, I was seeing Warren Buffett talk about it. These are acts of war.
Yeah.
They really are. I mean, we most conflicts like this, our world conflicts, end up starting from some sort of, economic decisions and the effects that that can cause. And, people aren't willing to work with you and negotiate with you if you're going to stab them in the back economically, because, you need all the different buckets to be working well for, the political
Machine.
machine and also the way in which people feel
Yeah.
in those countries, because there will be a pushback of nationalistic pride. I mean, look at the claims to annex Canada and annex Greenland have pushed people to become more nationalistic in some ways. Canada's fairly tame with their nationalism, and they're even like, I'm proud to be Canadian, like pushing for that. And there's nothing wrong with that,
Right.
but countries often can respond to things in a very aggressive manner like that, and you just don't know what the market's going to look like and how you're ever going to get stability again, really.
Yeah, I think what's terrifying to me is you're right about the alliances. I was reading something last week that said that both Japan and South Korea were in talks with China in order to combat the reciprocal tariffs from the United States. Like what happens if, I mean, how bad do you have to be in order to push Japan and South Korea into China's arms? And that's just what's baffling to me because we are at the whim of one person and nobody he made sure to put around him a bunch of yes men that will not challenge him publicly. And I think that's what's causing a lot of these issues because now he's just sporadically doing things that he believes is correct and we're hitting, I mean we're literally feeling the effects. In terms of, like I said, the surpluses and the equation that accounts for the surpluses, a lot of these countries also that were put onto this list don't even have tariffs or have very minimal. For example, Israel is a great one. Like they said that they were going to have zero tariffs on the United States. They were originally only at like one, like 1%, something like that. So I think it's very frustrating to watch because even our allies, he's blacklisting or putting them in weird positions. and it doesn't seem like he's backing off, which is hearing that news earlier today of like, oh, there's a potential of a 90-day pause, and I was like, okay, maybe he's coming to his senses a little bit and he's realizing like he needs time to negotiate these things and we're going to be in a better position. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, this is fake news. I was like, okay, so this guy is just he's out of his mind. There is no coming back from this. I think that he believes that there's going to be this huge, resurgence in the American economy in the future, but it, with the way that we're going and the way that countries are now viewing us, I mean, Canada, the Canadian Prime Minister just the other day, it was either yesterday or Saturday, announced that we're no longer like he said Canada no longer has the same partnership with America that it used to and views this same trading policy that it used to. He's like, we're in a different position now. The United States is no longer going to be our like the center of our trade and it's wild to me to hear like those kind of comments come from allies like Canada. That's a country that literally borders the United States.
Mhm.
What are we doing when we're turning people like Canada away from, or countries like Canada away from us and turning Canadians to hating us? It's just like I said, there's a certain sense of I do understand to an extent of like I said, protectionism and um, adding on certain tariffs, but you have to do that strategically. When you add on a tariff, what you should do is make sure that it's for a specific industry and have some sort of um, supplement in order to assist and make sure that it grows. For example, we look at like the CHIPS Act that was signed in by Joe Biden. If he started adding additional tariffs against Taiwan and said, okay, like we're trying to build up manufacturing here in the United States for chips and grow it, like that right there makes sense to me because you are putting in funding to make sure that a specific industry is growing in the United States. But that's not what Trump is doing here. He's gone widespread tariffs across the board, no matter the product, and it makes zero sense to me. I'm just watching this, and I'm invested in the market, and I'm watching this and being like what are we doing here? Why is my money going down rather than up? I thought Trump was great for the economy. This does not feel great to me at all.
Well, you should say thank you.
Did you say thank you yet?
I also noticed that he's silent too. It seems like all of the big, all the people like that are kind of silent. And I also think, does it last? I think there could be such a blowback to this that people are going to be like, you know what, being woke was better than being broke. Like,
Yeah.
like let's just go back to being woke. Like it was okay. And the thing is, I think it's a little people will remember these things. And I wonder if it pushes people to, actually kind of value free trade. I mean, I think you kind of see within some polling and stuff like that there's actually a little bit more for free trade. And, free trade isn't a solution to everything, but, um, looking at basically Canada, the United States, and Mexico, the goal was basically borderline economic integration in some ways. And, people can have their conspiracy theories about things like that, but I think it actually makes a whole lot of strategic sense because what you want is to create a region that businesses can prosper and thrive in, but not just businesses can prosper and thrive in, but also, ensuring that you have manufacturing here that's onshore and not just, nearshoring and things like that, but, throughout these different areas, like actually strengthening the economy from that standpoint. And, I think the American market becomes less of a place that you would be willing to invest in, at least right now. Or, it would take you years to begin to start those investments or, build a plant here. Um, you know, there's only so limited supply of plants you can actually buy. So might have to build a whole new one, and that costs a lot of capital and a lot of money to even be able to sustain it. I mean, you know, for very established companies, even, I mean, it costs billions of dollars for Ford or any of these other companies that already have things here to build. I mean, I can only imagine if like, some foreign company wants to sell cars here and they have to completely build here, like that's just going to turn them off to the market almost completely in some ways.
Yeah.
And like, I think it doesn't make sense to not allow some of those vehicles and goods into America because it's an overall kind of a win. I mean, the way I look at it specifically, even around Chinese EVs, Chinese American companies are not going to compete. They're going to sit there and lean in with what they have, and then when the Chinese vehicles are in, they're making enough money, they're going to enter the market, and you're going to be decimated.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to compete with these things, and I think that's one aspect that protectionism doesn't allow or doesn't protect you from innovation around the world. It's if some other country is able to innovate and create better products, those products are going to make it to your market eventually.
Yeah.
Tariff or not, there is going to be some sort of demand. And I think that, it overall punishes not just the American consumer, but American corporations and the overall global economy. Um, and acting like it doesn't affect anybody or that it's beautiful is kind of insane. It's just insane to do. And uh, I hear some of the right wing commentary saying that you should appreciate it or that money doesn't matter as much as like having our country back.
Yes.
And
Benny
it's
Johnson.
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Like, what are we
I
doing?
I was literally I saw a video this past weekend and so many by Benny Johnson and I've seen so many Republicans echo the same sentiment that they were like, nobody cares about those materialistic things like those iPhones, those iPads, that brand new car. They were like, you should be grateful that American jobs are coming back. And I was watching it and being like, is this legit? Like what they're essentially saying is we know we're going broke. It's just a part of freedom and bringing jobs back to the United States. And I mean, where are we? What exactly is the plan? Is the plan to keep, I mean, if that's what your plan is to make sure that jobs come back, then he has to keep those tariffs on. There's literally no room for negotiation of like t bringing those things, taking those things off, and then reverting back to exactly what was happening before. Or is it a negotiation tactic? Is it a way to say like, let's get rid of these tariffs and make things cheaper for us? Which one is it? What one are you guys actually fighting for? Because there's just so much inconsistency. And like I said, after seeing what Benny Johnson said about um, not caring about the materialistic things and being grateful that American jobs are coming back, I just, I mean, are they coming back? It doesn't seem like they're actually coming back right now. It sounds like we're about to go into a recession, which means less jobs are coming back. So I I don't know. I genuinely am confused on the messaging because like it goes back and forth of this is a negotiation tactic to these tariffs are necessary in order to bring American jobs back. It's like which one is it? Is it a negotiation tactic or not?
There is truth that it's a negotiation tactic, but the assumption is that there's no negotiation, it's a threat.
Yes.
It's not really negotiating. It's come to my feet and beg for me to treat you well. It's a like, I mean, and in some ways, it's a real move that I feel like Donald Trump would love. 50 nations have come to already talk to you, and I know I've talked about it before, but countries are willing to negotiate. They're willing to talk if that's something that you're wanting to do, even China.
Yeah.
So why aren't you using that as a negotiating tactic? One, because this is something you've promised, and your entire economic philosophy is, and the way of which to govern or excuse me, fund the government is from these tariffs. And basically cutting taxes. That's going to be the response to these tariffs. They're
Yeah.
going to have to cut taxes because, well, a tariff is a tax and you're already taxing people. So, what are you going to do? You're going to cut taxes for your friends and people that you know, and the industries that you like. And then that might give the market some assurance. Okay, well, at least we're going to have, you know, less taxes. We're going to be able to use more of our money to whatever their argument is, which, it's not going to trickle down. It's not. Um,
No,
you
it's
know,
not.
it's, um, but I think also, that's never really been the goal. Like for someone who says that they're so for the working man and the working class and all these different things, you screw them over at every single turn. Like I'm so tired of hearing people say that it's good and he's for the working class and this is going to help people like that and they've stolen our jobs. Okay, you're stealing people's money basically. You're throwing it out and burning it. It's like
I
I saw a video of Trump with the Joker face on and it's literally that. It's just Joker burning money. Yeah,
literally.
maybe there's some sort of economic theory behind it, but no economists actually think that, the people who actually understand the economy. And
Yeah.
I think the thing is when you're surrounded by yes men, you have an ego as big as this, and you think you're the smartest in the room at all times. Um, it's you're not going to listen to anybody else, so you're going to pursue whatever policy makes the most sense for you. You are going to, and this is an obsession of his since the 80s.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, it's seems to be, I mean, arguably it was the Republican position for decades. Now we're talking about like the 1913, like 1913, 1910s. But, Republican policy was very supportive of tariffs historically.
Yeah.
So we just didn't realize that Make America Great Again meant take it back to the 1800s. Like we should have been it focused on too early. Like the
Yeah.
19 no, no, that's too progressive for them. There's too much happening there. Like they have to go back even further to when and a policy that was just objectively worsened the depression. And we're not in a depression right now. We're in a pretty decent economy. So is there potential that the American market was just so good and it was just going to power through? Sure. But the assumption that the world doesn't have some other market to turn to or other markets that are, I'm not just even talking about China. There's other countries who have economic heft now, especially in certain regions. And, if you're not offering any reason for them to cooperate with you or work with you, they're going to turn to other partners. And why wouldn't you would? Because other partners seem more stable, you
Canada,
know?
Canada is literally the prime example of that. Like I said, they were talking about how that the United States is no longer the premier trade partner and that they're going to have to adjust appropriately. And that's just, like I said, wild to me. Also, I found the Benny Johnson tweet. I was mistaken in exactly what it said, and I'm going to read it to you right now. Losing money means nothing. Digital ones and zeros. In the end, you won't miss any of it. So, in other words, to make sure that I'm interpreting this correctly, um, it that money in your bank account, you don't actually need it. At the end of the day, it's better to be poor than to be rich because when you die, you don't get to take that money with you. So might as well lose all of it now while you're still alive and live a miserable life. In other words, is what Benny Johnson is trying to preach here. Um,
But at least people are being deported and your country is becoming it's basically a revolution is what they're almost acting like it as if he's basically taking our country back and we had to do this and all these different arguments and it's really it I don't understand why you have to commit economic suicide to like
literally economic suicide.
and it's unfortunately unlike Benny Johnson we don't have all have like some Russian money that we could just flow to us but um I do think it kind of shows you that, you know, if you cared about poor people, you wouldn't put them in worse predicaments. And understand something. Every single time there is economic issues like this, the poor suffer far more than anybody else. And you don't really care.
100%. Um, we're about out of time. I do want to touch on that Benny Johnson thing though, really quickly. It's funny that you said that we don't all have Russian money. Um, it's wild to me, and I think I said this before, that you don't realize, or not that you don't realize. It's wild to me that Russians liked a foreign adversary of the United States, an enemy to the US, liked your content so much that they felt obligated to pay you. And not just pay you, but not even give you any talking points. If that doesn't explain how anti-American Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, and everybody else who was involved with that scandal is, I don't know what is. Um, but anyways, I appreciate the talk, Chase. Um, I am always fearful because I say like there's something new that's going to happen tomorrow, and I unfortunately have no doubt that there will be something new that we have to cover. We, as I said, we ran out of time, but next time we talk, hopefully we can at least throw into the discussion the Wisconsin outcome and what it means for Democrats. But I appreciate your time as always, Chase, and I will talk to you later, my friend.
Sounds good.